ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Weather Center. Thank you very much for joining me, and happy Monday, March 4th, 2024. We have the marathon of upcoming storm systems to discuss that could not only produce some wintry impacts up north, but also some severe weather conditions down across the deep south, the Dixie Alley region, as well as the southeast, and maybe extending into the mid-Atlantic region. Hang tight, folks. We're going to get right into that, but first, please like and share this video, and consider subscribing to the channel if you are brand new or have been contemplating it for an extended period of time. I'd love to have you join the Weather Center community as we continue to pump out these routine updates and get ready for severe weather season of the spring, as well as hurricane season 2024, which you do not want to miss future updates, so please make sure you have your notification bell turned on as well. With that being said, folks, fasten your seatbelts and let's get in here. So first and foremost, I want to draw interest and draw attention to this lovely feature we have perched off the South and North Carolina coastline. It's situated right over the Gulf Stream, which makes this a very, very particular feature to discuss, and I don't really see it being highlighted on any other one's radars, because I'm sure you're already picking up what I'm putting down. We have that trademark anticyclonic outflow that's occurring on both sides of the system, particularly along the northern axes of this center of circulation that's perched just off the North Carolina coast, preparing to make landfall. And the one area that I'm really identifying that really stands out to me is all this convective activity that's flaring up around it. Now, we probably do have some frontal activity associated with it. This is what passed through central Florida yesterday, producing a lot of the widespread enhanced weather activity, some severe throughout the southern half of the peninsula, including one tornado warning that was issued for Miami. Now, of course, I'm not characterizing this. I'm not sounding the alarm. This is not an official page, so unfortunately I can't do so. I don't have the means, but this is definitely looking fairly on the subtropical side, especially with all this offshore convection and thunderstorm activity that's affiliated with it. We do have a little bit of dry air intrusion occurring on the south side, which is probably indicative of that dry, cold air advection that is helping to produce surface fronts and upper fronts with this low pressure center, so we're not really going to call it anything specific. It is definitely a cyclonic feature that will be making its way into the mid-Atlantic coast, helping to up our rain chances, our thunderstorm activity, getting some snap, crackle, pop of the lightning and thunder activity for most North Carolina as it continues to progress off to the north through Virginia, West Virginia, eventually up into the northeast, where we can finally see it really transition to our next baroclinic jet-supported frontal system. All right, but let's get into the meat and potatoes. So this is where we stand on day one. This is today, March 4th, and you can see an extensive area from the lower Great Lakes, the Midwest, all the way down through the southern plains into eastern Texas and most of Louisiana altogether, highlighted for that level 1 severe risk, which means we are likely to see some severe weather. It just won't be very widespread. It'll be very isolated in nature, but this encompasses a very large geographic area, which is definitely worth monitoring and noting. Day 2, you can see we start to diminish most of that northern periphery threat. We go down to just a light shading of green, which would indicate thunderstorm activity for the Great Lakes, especially Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, the same area that was afflicted by our previous severe weather outbreak that occurred not too long ago that we did document on the channel. Thank you guys very much for tuning into that. And now the severe weather threat particularly covers most of Arkansas, Louisiana, slowly spreading further eastward into the majority of Mississippi, and this is going to continue to move off to the east with that. On day 3, you can see it rapidly begins to transition to a Florida threat, and I'm very on board with this, especially after yesterday's daytime convective threat, the thunderstorm activity that blossomed not only in response to that synoptic scale driver that we had move across that I just highlighted on the infrared satellite, that has now taken on a full-fledged cyclonic spin off the east coast, but we also have our daytime heating, our diurnal threats, in association with helping to spur a lot of that instability and buoyancy, i.e. that surface level cape that we are going to see highlighted on a lot of our future charts here as I take you through this video. Moving forward, guys, we also have a day 4 threat, which I'm very, very on board for as well. This is valid for March 7th into the 8th, with our next upcoming storm system we'll brief here in a moment. And then our day 5, according to Storm Prediction Center, valid for March 8th through March 9th, is going to encompass once again the Gulf coastline, and I'll show you exactly why. We have some really strong spring signals here, despite a lot of our long-range models, the GFS, and our new artificial intelligence European model, which I will actually take you through here to see what that model is thinking, literally almost to an extent, in terms of the barrage and the marathon of storm systems we're going to have, as well as maybe a return to winter form before we finally exit the season per the calendar altogether middle of this month. All right, so as promised, this is our European model, and if you look at the top left, we have our AIFS, and what that stands for is our Artificial Intelligence Forecasting System. I believe I'm living out one word, but we'll go ahead and nix that for the time being. I don't want to pull that up for you. I'm still very brand new to this model. I haven't looked at it too often, but it does go out 360 hours just like our GFS, so it's very nice to see that we have something that can go toe-to-toe toe with our long-range GFS, taking us beyond that 240-hour mark as most of our mid-range models, the Canadian, the Icon more or less, even though I know its longer range goes out to 180. The traditional Euro, which is still active, it is still available for us to use, goes out to that 240-hour mark as well, as we're very familiar with. So it's nice to have something that can combat whatever long-range tendencies the GFS likes to throw at us. We can kind of compare and contrast now for that same time frame. So anyways, we'll go ahead and start the loop, and right out of the gate, you can see over the Central Plains headed into the Ohio-Mississippi Valley, we have cyclogenesis over Kansas and parts of Missouri. A 1,005 millibar low that is drawing in a lot of good colder air from up north. You can see a high pressure moving through the central Canadian provinces, coming out of Western Canada, moving through the Dakotas and surging down towards the south. And in response to that, we have lots of really good Gulf and return moisture out of the Caribbean and the Western Atlantic coming up across the eastern half of the United States, which is exactly why Storm Prediction Center has such an elongated area of severe weather highlighted all the way from the lower Great Lakes down through the southern plains to that Gulf Coast. It makes 100% sense. And then take a look off the east coastline. You can still see our little low pressure center spinning in towards the Cape Hatteras area. It'll be very interesting to see what unfolds with that over the next 24 hours. If we see even more thunderstorm activity blossom near to its vortex, especially on that eastern flank that we noticed on the infrared, it'll be very interesting to see if anybody else starts to talk about it, and maybe if we get a post-season or a post-month, however they describe it, analysis with this to kind of determine exactly what sort of characteristics we had involved. As we continue through time, the AI European model does show that extensive line of convective activity, the thunderstorm and rainfall activity from the northern Great Lakes, the Michigan Peninsula, through to the Gulf coastline. And if we continue through the loop, you can see we do expect cyclogenesis, low-pressure formation over the deep southeast, Georgia, the Carolinas, before progressing off the mid-Atlantic coast, becoming our next possible winter storm-like feature for the Northeast. It's still up in the air whether or not we're going to get some snowfall or heavy snowfall with this, because since spring is trying to come in a little early, if you notice, our freezing line is well to the north of this system. So this entire feature, as of right now, according to the AI Euro, is going to be majority rainfall and thunderstorms along its leading edge, especially with this conveyor belt of warm air now positioned off the east coast, the mid-Atlantic region, driving that low-level warm front towards the northeast coastline. And before you get too heavily involved with this storm system and how it tracks off to the northeast, we have another one preparing to come down out of the northern Central Plains, out of the northern Four Corners regions, the Intermountain west of Montana, Wyoming, the Front Range of Colorado, already helping to spawn in not one but two different low-pressure systems, although the model isn't stamping this one as of yet. You can see a clear indication in the isobars and the thickness packing here that we do have a bit of a wave embedded in the pattern that will likely show itself as we continue this loop forward. So with the exiting of that first one, there you go. We have that first system very quickly occlude and move back up into Ontario, driving some of that colder air and that modified polar high pressure out of the Canadian territories into the United States. And then here we go. Once again, we have Oklahoma, Texas panhandle development occurring with a very good warm conveyor belt out in front of it that's going to help us to drive that next severe weather threat. If you go back to the days 4 and 5, this is exactly what we were looking at. And you can see very, very good thunderstorm and rainfall activity affiliated with this system as it continues to march off to the east-northeast, with the AI model even indicating that we could see some stronger stuff, particularly through the Florida Panhandle, Alabama, Georgia, and then back through Mississippi, extending back into the eastern periphery of Louisiana, where it'll probably be coming to an end as of this point. This is as we're getting into March 9th, Saturday. This is 7 p.m. Friday night for us Eastern Standard Time, folks, and you translate this through, and this is looking a bit more like a very expansive severe weather threat that we could see, especially since we do have a bit more colder air impacting our spring-like conditions out ahead of it. This is a very, very good textbook spring signal here, folks, where we don't have as much of a strong polar or let alone an Arctic push. Arctic is out of the question. I can't even see the thickness lines on this chart, even into southern central Canada at this point. So this is a nice bona fide polar push out of the north, interacting with our very, very warm spring-like temperatures over the south, and that's exactly why we're going to have some severe weather associated with it. And then since we can with this AI Euro model, we're just going to continue to scroll through time. There goes our next big system. This one will likely produce some really good wraparound snowfall, some lake effect snow through the Great Lakes, the Michigan Peninsula getting back up into the northeast, because that 540 line is wrapped up in this deep occluded low vortex as it marches through Maine into eastern Quebec. We have a very, very good ridge that builds in over western central Conus for a little while, which is going to help to really amp up how much warm air advection spring is going to be knocking on the door of the western half of the United States, despite that hellacious, that record-breaking record-breaking snow event for the Sierra Nevadas, California, the Pacific Northwest, getting through Nevada into the Intermountain West Great Basin area out there for the last several days now. Feet of snow piling up on the higher terrain features out there. And if I continue through the back end of the loop, you can see here comes another storm system that's expected to do exactly the same thing as our last one, guys. Bring down some cold air from up north. We're interacting with those spring-like temperatures across the deep south. Another potential severe weather threat through here. And since we can definitely go further and further out and through time, what I'm also going to be paying attention to as we get closer to middle of March is notice these shields, this area of reflectivity here that's poised by the European model. This is echoed on the GFS and a little bit of the extended portion of the actual Euro, the regular Euro that we're used to. There is some kind of energy that's going to linger over the Western Gulf, come off of Mexico, perhaps affiliated with our subtropical jet, and expected to develop and march over the Yucatan Peninsula, parts of Cuba, and eventually the Bahamas. I'll take it through a little bit further in time, and you can see that wave coming out of there, moving across the Bahamas, producing some very heavy rainfall, trying to drag down another cold front for our Caribbean areas. We'll talk more about that on a future update, guys. This is very, very far out in time. Like we would typically throw the disclaimer out there for the GFS. This is our AI Euro, our long-range Euro now, and you can see we are now into March 18th, already getting into the back end of the month, and let's not rush it any more than time has already been moving. Now we're coming back to a staple product here. This is our traditional Euro, valid for 0Z, and as you see that first storm system unfold over the south and southeast and transition up the east coast, hot on its trail, you have that secondary system expected to form up, become a little bit more widespread and scatter with some very good indications. We'll likely see some pretty good severe weather conditions, if not enhanced weather conditions out ahead of it as this system further deepens, moving over the central Ohio, Mississippi Valley, centered right over parts of western Kentucky, Tennessee, moving out of Missouri and Arkansas. And as the system continues to move on and really deepen down, there goes that wraparound snowfall. The trademark Euro, as I'll call it, does not have as expansive of a snow threat, with a large majority of it still hanging back into Canada until the last second, where we get a little bit more off of the Great Lakes, moving into the upper periphery of the Northeast states, almost the border of Canada, United States altogether, and then finally becoming a full-fledged snow event as that system really deepens and becomes a full-fledged barotropic system, going almost stationary over the eastern Canadian territories up there, and then finally exiting the AOR at the tail end of the loop. And as I mentioned, at 240 hours out, you can see that residual precip activity over the Gulf of Mexico that the AI Euro and the GFS have been hinting towards, so something to watch long range. One positive thing we do have to discuss is even though we will likely have some very good damaging winds, damaging hail affiliated with these next couple of systems, we don't have that trademark shear component. There goes our first system, some modest mid-level winds at 850 millibars, a nice little warm conveyor moving over the Florida Peninsula, Georgia, South Carolina, topping out at maybe 30 knots at maximum. So we won't really have a lot of that shear to tilt our updrafts and get them spinning, which means our tornado threat is going to be somewhat limited here. Obviously, we have a combination now of daytime heating, daytime convective ingredients, as well as our synoptic forcing, because this is a large-scale weather feature that is going to mix things up a little bit. It'll be a mixed bag of impacts, so we can't eliminate the tornado threat altogether as we saw yesterday. However, it does seem like this is more or less going to be a damaging wind kind of a scenario, as well as a damaging hail, large hail, 3/4 of an inch to an inch, if not greater, in some localized areas. With the next system, that kind of goes out the window a little bit. We have a much more robust area of southerly flow at 850 millibars, especially through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, even getting up into the southern Tennessee, North Carolina area, as this system really continues to push towards the mid-Atlantic and through the rest of the southeast. So I am more or less thinking this could possibly be our next chase event. We might be back up in the panhandle for this. We're going to have to see how this shakes out. This is 132 hours into the future, folks. This is the following weekend up and coming. So we'll exactly have to watch what this kind of transitions into, especially run to run, model to model. We'll take a look at what the AI Euro, the regular Euro, the Canadian, the GFS. We'll look at everything, all of our high-res data as we get closer in time, and see exactly what sets itself up, and see if Storm Prediction Center starts to elevate our risk with this one, because this is definitely looking like a bit more of a firecracker, if you will, than the first one coming through. We will likely see severe weather with both, since we have those spring warm conditions, that warm advection, that good moisture advection, instability coming up out of the south, open Gulf kind of setup, getting some moisture feed from the Caribbean, even Central America. So we do have the dynamics and the ingredients ready for a robust severe weather threat. However, I'm thinking the second one's going to be a bit more of a heavy hitter than the first. We'll see. We're going to zoom in close with our RRFS model, the RRFS, the RRFS as I like to call it, as I've mentioned in TikTok and other previous YouTube updates. And we'll go very quickly through the simulated reflectivity here. You can see some possible tornadic, or I should say waterspout activity in the central eastern Gulf as early as later today, later this morning. In fact, looking at the timestamps, this is 11 a.m. in a couple hours from me shooting this video. And And as we quickly roll through time, you can see that onshore flow already sparking some discrete cells. So Alabama, Pensacola area are going to have to watch closer to the Eglin Air Force Base area. Looks like more of an interior Alabama threat with some areas of Shreveport closer to the Barksdale Air Force Base. Southern Arkansas could see some pretty good severe action pop up. And I'm definitely going to be watching for my viewers in Baton Rouge and especially the New Orleans area, where we could possibly see some discrete cells firing as they roll inland, especially as we get into the back end of today. And just after sunset tonight, it could be a nocturnal threat we have to watch for out there. And then take a look up over North Carolina, guys. If you're looking, that looks very, very subtropical, moving through Newport, Cape Hatteras, and Greenville. Definitely very curious to see what that looks like tonight on the radar, the live radar imagery. We might even pop in for a brief live stream depending on what it looks like, and if we do have some rotational cells within that, which would be very, very indicative of a system that has taken on some subtropical characteristics. It harkens back to Tropical Storm Ophelia of last year. We're looking very, very similar in terms of structuring, characteristics, and what the models are painting on not only the high-res picture, but the large-scale picture. And then if we quickly broad brush this through, you can see that severe weather threat is just going to continue to extend further and further off to the east, with cyclogenesis finally occurring somewhere up over the central Mississippi, Ohio valleys, where you could possibly see an extension of severe weather into Tennessee, southern Kentucky, but a large majority of our threat is now going to be pushing through Georgia, maybe some leftover thunderstorms in Alabama, Mississippi, maybe not on the severe threat, however, but I am thinking leading edge of this system right in through this quadrant here from Georgia, the western tip of South Carolina, all the way through the Florida Peninsula as we get into the day on Wednesday, Tuesday night into Wednesday. We'll have to be very, very careful in terms of what we're doing as we get ready to start the workday on Wednesday, because it does look like interior Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, with a little bit of enhancement off of our Gulf Stream, is likely to see that severe weather threat to include damaging winds, damaging hail, and some isolated tornadic activity, because again, even though we don't have that overall shear component, we cannot rule it out altogether, because we have localized impacts brought on by our diurnal trends, day and nighttime, daytime heating, leftover moisture from previous thunderstorm activity, and we also have a synoptic trigger, this large-scale low-pressure system. Supercell composite doesn't look all that impressive. As I said, we could see a stray supercell try to pop off. That's why I very quickly went through the 48-hour loop here on the NSSL model. We're not seeing too much in the way that could hint at spectacular tornadic activity, but the threat is there, and even as you look over here very late on the day on Tuesday, there are some very brief and weak indications, or signals, I should say, over central Florida that we might have a stray strong thunderstorm pop off as we see the sun set on Tuesday and we begin to start the day on Wednesday. So there you go, guys. We are all wrapped up with this latest Weather Center segment. As I've said in previous updates, every single one of you out there, all my latest subscribers, my long-term subscribers from the hurricane season last year when we first started up this channel, it has been an amazing ride with you guys. It's been wonderful learning and growing on this channel, and learning as myself, a up-and-coming meteorologist, continuing to go through my schooling, having restarted my military weather component. It's been a phenomenal experience with each and every one of you guys, and thank you for everybody who will be subscribing. Thank you for those who have yet to come, yet to discover the channel. I'm really looking forward to interacting and connecting with each and every one of you, whether it be here in the Weather Center or out in the trenches during the worst that Mother Nature has to throw at us. I hope you have a wonderful start to your week. Happy Monday once again. I can't believe it is March 4th already. Time is just flying by, guys. Please like and share this video to those who you believe will benefit it, or just to get the word out there for everybody out there in the south, the southeast, as we see these next 2, possibly 3 severe weather scenarios begin to unfold as we go through time. Consider hitting that subscribe button, and if you do click that subscribe button, first of all, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Please make sure you have your notifications turned on so you don't miss future videos, whether they be these hard segments or our live streams coming up. We'll talk to you again very soon, folks. Until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.